What is good? It is your boy PvbloGrey, and we are back with another video. I don't know what exactly I'm gonna call this one, but basically the reason I'm making this video is simply because I've been doing some research and continual research, and I'm trying to be a scientist but not be biased with what my theory is. But my theory is that us as black people, Aboriginal black people, doesn't matter from which land, whether it be the Americas, Europe, Africa, Asia, the islands of Asia, that all the Aboriginal people, right, that we were on all of these continents and we all shared a similar belief system and consciousness, and that the stories that are been told through time have been misconstrued, and that a lot of things took place here in America. Basically, the reason I'm bringing this up is because I honestly believe that all of that shit that went down in Egypt happened here too. If it didn't just happen here, it happened here also. And if it didn't happen also, it happened here first. To put it like that. There's multiple similarities. I wish I had all the information to give you right now, but one similarity is that here in the Americas, in North America, we have a place called Memphis that also sits at a delta, with similar cities, mounds, and things like that. The Americas also have the most pyramids. I know a lot of people think that the Egyptian pyramids that go straight like this are like the best pyramids, but according to geometrical shapes, science, it is a lot harder to make a step pyramid than it is to make a straight edge pyramid, construction wise. And that's why the greatest structures, the largest pyramids, happen to be in America. And it's just that I feel like it's crazy, it's been downplayed and forgot about, you know what I'm saying? So let's get into this video. Like what I'm doing here, like, comment, subscribe.
The Joe Rogan Experience.
Do you have anything in this book about the Olmecs?
No, not really. I mentioned them briefly. I explored the Olmec mystery in.
And what's important here is the Olmecs and where they sit at in history, because we all know about, anyone who knows about the American history, you got the Olmecs, the Incas, the Aztecs, the Mayans. Let me show you why these people are important.
Considerable depth.
Can you explain that to people with maybe
In Fingerprints of the Gods? Yes, so it's considered to be the earliest high culture of Central America. Everybody's heard about the Aztecs. Everybody's heard about the Maya. But before the Aztecs and before the Maya, there were a culture who are referred to as the Olmecs. Again, we don't know what they call them.
And the reason why this is important is because he said before all of this, it was the Olmecs, right? The Olmecs, this is what I honestly believe. So just like he said, the Olmecs started first. You're going to find out that they just been passing on teachings that have just been altered over time, which is the same thing that have taken places in other locations, such as Asia and Africa. The same thing here in America, where you can see where in the Middle East, where, I don't know if it's in this video, where like Sumatra, where those teachings transformed into something else. Like the teachings of ancient Egypt came from the empire of Ethiopia first. It's just ancient teachings that have been passed down, and these teachings go along with the people. The teachings get altered, the grouping of people also get altered. You get what I'm saying? So people think the Olmecs disappeared. They never went anywhere. The culture just got altered. You get what I'm saying? But you'll see where I'm going with this.
themselves. That's what the Aztecs called them. They called them the Olmecs. It means the rubber heap because the rubber-producing area of Mexico. They worked in giant megalithic constructions. What they're most famous for is these huge carved human heads, which can be on a scale of up to 20 to 25 tons in weight, and which have curious features, which have been interpreted variously as Polynesian, African, don't look like classic. Curious features, which...
Man, just take a look, man. Just look. And the reason why this is interesting, these features, they're Negro features. And a lot of, I know you heard the saying, if you haven't, Asiatic black man. Why? Because you'll see, like, in a country like Malaysia, these niggas is light-skinned. They look Asian, like, you know, based off skin tone, they're Asian, and certain phenotypes such as their eyes being a certain way. But other than that, they look black. They have black features, noses, the big lips, just like this. That's because they've been on that island. They've been in that area for so long. They have a lot of their Aboriginal ancestor DNA in them. You get what I'm saying? Same thing with the Aboriginal people of Australia. They look just like this. These are the indigenous people of the land that live there. They look just like this. You get what I'm saying? So, with that being said, let me get back into the video.
Have been interpreted variously as Polynesian, African, don't look like classic Native American features. But one of the things I've realized is that there is no classic Native American feature. That the Native Americans are have a very complex genetic story with very many different elements brought into it, and we shouldn't be necessarily surprised by the supposedly not.
And it makes you wonder, why would he say that? Possibly because we had a network across the entire world where we intermingled with with people of our like kind. Put it like this, let's just say it's just like with Mother Nature with animals, and I'm sorry to compare us to animals, but when you stay in a different location, you have different adaptations. We can still have the same DNA, but I'm gonna adapt a little bit different if I stay in this area. When you stay in a different area, I'm gonna adapt a little bit different, and then we intermingle. We gonna have different features and phenotypes and shit like that with children. You get what I'm saying? This is the same thing. That's why he's saying you can't tell where the DNA, but you can tell what they look like. You can't tell where they came from, but you can tell what they look like. It's because we've been social for years. And I don't know if it's in this video, but you're gonna find out where people used to think that the fucking Sahara Desert back in the day was too barren to fucking cross, and then they find out it was a fucking highway. People weren't scared to cross it. Niggas did it all the time. People traveled across oceans and shit. That's what the Mayan were called. The Mayan, what was it called? The Naga Mayans, I believe. Which is the Mayans that I believe came to Egypt and intermingled, and that was something that was documented in history. But back to the video. Let me find my plot.
Native American look of these Olmecs.
What do you think those helmets were that they were wearing?
Nobody knows, because no physical example of such a helmet has ever been found, just like no physical example of an Egyptian pharaoh's crown has ever been found. All we see is the stone reproductions of them.
Do they universally wear these helmets? In these
they pretty much all wear these helmets in the Olmec stonework. There's another fascinating figure from La Venta, one of the Olmec sites, which is the earliest ever image of a plumed or feathered serpent. The feathered serpent is a famous icon in Central America. Quetzalcoatl, who's the god of peace, the bringer of civilized.
Pay attention. The serpent. We know when it comes to Kemetic teachings, serpent, it's simultaneous with Kundalini energy, your higher self, being greater than yourself, ascending. Pay attention. It was regarded as a divine animal. Listen.
Feathered serpent is a famous icon in Central America. Quetzalcoatl, who's the god of peace, the bringer of civilization, who is associated, for example, with the famous pyramid of Kukulkan.
Think about it. in Kemetic teachings, when you ascend, you find that peace. You find peace in understanding that everything is what it is. Whether you do understand or don't understand, the understanding of being able to know that you'll be able to understand things and that you won't is what brings you peace. That's the only understanding you need. This is what the man is explaining. It's a shared belief between cultures across the ocean. This is amazing shit. There's a reason why you can find an Ankh here in America and you also find it in Egypt. It's because everybody was interconnected, whether you believe it or not. People have been traveling this world longer than we thought, before people we know in modern history that they're exploring and discovering. Shit didn't need discovered. People been on this planet as long as the planet been here.
Is just another name for Quetzalcoatl at Chichen Itza, where on the spring equinox a shadow effect creates the image of a serpent coiling down the stairway and joining with the carved head of the serpent. But there's the image from La Venta. That's the earliest image of a plumed serpent in the Americas. And sitting in the middle of it, and I made a big deal out of this because I think it is a big deal in Magicians of the Gods, sitting in the middle of it is this human figure who's holding this strange bag in his hand. And it's just a fact that those identical bags are found in ancient Sumer in the hands of individuals who were considered to be civilization bringers, and they also show up on Pillar 43 at Göbekli Tepe. I call them man bags. And in that case, at Göbekli Tepe, we know they're at least 11,600 years old. So I wonder if we're looking at a sort of badge of office of a group of civilizers who traveled
11,000 years old. That's older than any Greek civilization. That means these people were doing this shit way before Alexander the Great existed, before the Jesus of the Bible existed. People were here in the Americas. Yeah, I know the shit doesn't add up. Probably shouldn't be listening to that one book. Should base your shit off multiple sources and draw a conclusion, not one source. That's why you can't go off one book. But anyway, this is what is very fucking interesting about this shit. Very interesting. I can't wait to get to the next video. It's going to all be included in this one. But
around the world trying to bring back to life.
When I interrupted you talking about Quetzalcoatl, what were you about to say?
I can't remember. I'm in California. I've been smoking like...
I don't care.
Quetzalcoatl before that. I have another question. The Olmecs, you were talking about the genetics of these people that live in Native Americans, that they vary widely. But the Olmecs seem to have very similar features, the thick lips, the wide noses. Why do we think that is?
Well, this is part of a curious mystery that is not unconnected to the genetic mystery. It's been known by archaeologists for quite a long time that there are anomalous skulls in parts of Brazil, which appear to show very strongly Polynesian or African features, very much like the features that we see on the Olmec heads. And a number of archaeologists who got into trouble...
Listen, I'm not accusing this man of being racist or nothing like that, but I can tell he has a habit of falling into just a habit where you don't want to necessarily say African first. You say Polynesian. Why? Because Polynesians... Our first thought would be more similar, because Polynesians are just like I described, like the people of Malaysia, where they have the same, except for the slanted eyes and things like that, they have the same features: the wide nose, the full lips, and the woolly hair. They're gonna go with the Polynesians first because of the lighter skin and the Asian phenotype, and not necessarily the African, because honestly it's just a shame that they have to use the African to refer to the Negro when it doesn't have to be that, because if you could just say the Aboriginal person, that would be enough to let you know what phenotype and what features they have. But back to the video.
With their colleagues for this, have used that to argue many years ago, 30, 40 years ago, that the settlement story of the Americas is much more complicated than we've realized. And what the DNA is doing is it's telling us that there was something really weird happened with settlement. You see, what happened with those African or Polynesian-looking skulls was that they were tested for DNA.
He had to say African first. It's true, bro. They look like us. I'm not even saying that I'm African, but that's just the best way to describe it in modern day times.
When DNA technology was not as advanced as it is today. And what that DNA showed was that they were more closely related to modern Native Americans than they are to any other people in the world. So the notion that there was some connection with Polynesia or Africa was dismissed.
And just think about it. He said back then when they first did this shit, when first DNA testing materials came out, they were related to Native Americans. Right? That was then. Let me rewind that back though.
And what the DNA is doing is it's telling us that there was something really weird happened with settlement. You see, what happened with those African or Polynesian-looking skulls was that they were tested for DNA when DNA technology was not as advanced as it is today. And what that DNA showed was that they were more closely related to modern Native Americans than they are to any other people in the world. So the notion that there was some connection with Polynesia or Africa was dismissed. But now that we have very firm evidence of an Australasian genetic signal, Australian Aborigines, Papua New Guinea, Melanesians, with those...
Melanesians... Like I said, these are all the people that have the same phenotypes just like us, where they're aboriginal, the noses, the lips, all the other features, the melanin in the skin, that type of shit. It's showing with better technology. And
kind of features. Now that we have the genetic evidence that is found in the Amazon, we have to go back to that old evidence and reconsider it.
Wow. Yeah, I would love to find out what that is. They've always fascinated me. The Olmecs, it's always been such a strange image, the large heads with the helmets on them, and how... Did they universally look like that? I mean, all of
the features are very, very similar.
But... it's funny he said back when DNA testing wasn't... I don't think that's necessarily what it was. I just think back then science was a lot more racist. Not saying that it isn't now, but I don't think it is as much as racist as it used to be. But back then they was saying niggas came from monkeys because that's what the fuck they wanted niggas to fucking believe.
Wow.
They're very, very, very similar.
And always with the helmets.
And almost always. I won't claim that every single Olmec head has a helmet on it, because I think I've seen...
And y'all see how they made the analogy, how the Olmec heads had the helmets, and they didn't have any evidence of that. They couldn't find any physical evidence. Same thing with the pharaohs, and they couldn't find any physical evidence of the headdress. There's a reason
it's quite a while ago since I explored the Olmec area. But what's fascinating about them is they are supposedly the first high civilization of Central America. That they create structures on a massive scale, that you can see connections between them and the later Maya. That whole mystery of the Mayan calendar was clearly inherited from the Olmecs. It wasn't something the Maya made up. The Olmec use that same symbolism. So the Mayan calendar is actually an Olmec calendar. And if we then consider the possibility that the Olmecs may just be the latest, the earliest surviving manifestation of that calendar, it could go back much further than that.
All right, so let me pause it right here and let me look for this other video that might have some more information. All right, I finally found the clip. Sadly, the best information is at the end of this clip, so please pay close attention.
See what's there. If this isn't too much of a diversion, let me give you the example of Guatemala. Guatemala is a small country. If I remember correctly, it's not much more than 100,000 square kilometers in size. It is filled with intriguing Mayan ruins. Everybody has heard of Tikal. Mm-hmm. What archaeologists didn't know was that literally within walking distance of Tikal, surrounding that whole area were more than 60,000 structures that they hadn't identified. And these have all been identified by LiDAR in a country that's just 100,000 kilometers in area. So you have to ask yourself, in that 5.5 million square kilometers of the Amazon, if LiDAR technology could be applied comprehensively, what would we find beneath there? And the evidence already is extremely tempting and extremely tantalizing, and I'm intrigued by these huge geometrical figures, which involve
The reason I'm even playing this part is simply to have you understand how advanced this civilization was, and how much of this information was passed on from previous civilization to the next to the next.
Primarily circles and squares, and they are classic henges in the sense that they are deep ditches surrounded by huge embankments. They're extremely geometrical. For example, you can find an octagon surrounding a square. At a place called Jacosá in the Amazon, you can find a square perfectly enclosing a circle. Now that is an exercise called squaring the circle that our academics have given to the Greeks. They said the Greeks were the first people who performed that exercise. But now we find in dated sites in the Amazon that this was being done in the Amazon long before the Greeks.
What are the dates?
The earliest...
You heard what he said. This shit was done in the Amazon far before the Greeks. And if you didn't know, the Greeks came before the Romans. The Romans had all the nice structures and shit, and the Colosseum. That came after the Greeks. The Greeks were there first. This happened before the Greeks. Way before. You heard what he said.
Dates that have been found in these sites now are about 3,500 years old. About 3,500 years old. But the evidence is that the sites have been constantly remade. And what intrigues me is what remains in that 5.5 million square kilometers that has not been investigated yet. We are just, I think, looking at the edges of a mystery. The archaeologists involved, who are mainly from Finland and also from Brazil, feel the same. Their estimate is that there are thousands of these structures remaining in the jungle, and they're open as to how old they may ultimately prove to be. The investigation needs to be done, but what's fascinating about them is this very powerful geometry and astronomy. So a number of the sites are perfectly aligned to true north, true...
And why I had to stop it there is that we know with the Kemetic culture, astronomy was huge. It's so were the structures. They really knew they shit, and they had shit aligned perfectly to align to true north astronomically.
South, true east, and true west. I'm not talking about magnetic north. I'm talking about true astronomical north. To do that, there's only one way to do it, and that's with astronomy. So that tells us that astronomers were at work in the Amazon. The geometry is very complex and very precise. That tells us that people with geometrical skills were at work in the Amazon. And thirdly, the scale of the sites of hundreds of meters, gigantic earthworks on the scale of hundreds of meters, tells us that this was highly organized.
They're highly organized, genius as fuck. It sounds like another culture. Sound like Kemetic culture to me. Very similar teachings. Please pay attention to the end of this clip. There's about 2 more minutes to go in this.
Project that was undertaken on a very large scale by very large numbers of people. It's a wonderful mystery, and it deserves much further attention. And that's Jacosá, exactly. The squares, wow. Squaring the circle. So you can see the outside embankment, and then inside it is the square. They found because areas of the rainforest had been cleared. Economic interest said, we want to make a cattle ranch here, or we want to make a soybean farm here, so we're just going to clear the rainforest. In the process of clearing the rainforest, they start discovering these earthworks that had previously been completely overgrown by the jungle. Then the next step was to say, what can we do to find out more about this? Obviously, they don't want to destroy more jungle, and luckily we have a technology which is LiDAR, as I mentioned, which uses radar. And using LiDAR, they've been able to identify many more of these sites, and then to get to the sites without destroying the jungle, and to begin excavations on them, and to find that they go back, in the cases of the ones that have been explored so far, at least 3,000 years. This is an intriguing development, completely unexplained in our understanding of the Amazon. And what it suggests is a heritage of extremely ancient knowledge. You don't wake up one morning and create a perfectly geometrical square or circular earthwork that's perfectly aligned to true north, south, east, and west on an enormous scale. There has to be a background to that. There has to be a reason for doing it. And the evidence...
Listen to what he just said. There has to be a heritage of shared knowledge.
You don't wake up one morning and create a perfectly geometrical square or circular earthwork that find that they go back, in the cases of the ones that have been explored so far, at least 3,000 years. This is an intriguing development, completely unexplained in our understanding of the Amazon. And what it suggests is a heritage of extremely ancient knowledge. You don't wake up one morning and create a perfectly geometrical square or circular earthwork that's perfectly aligned to true north, south, east, and west on an enormous scale. There has to be a background to that. There has to be a reason for doing it. And the evidence is none of these sites were lived in. There's no habitation refuse found in them whatsoever. We don't know what they were used for. I make the case in America before that they're connected to a system of ideas which is found all around the world, which is to do with death and the afterlife destiny of the soul.
That afterlife destiny of the soul. A shared thought it's similar to Kemetic teachings. If you had the book, The Kemetic Tree of Life, I got it over here. I'm not about to grab it. I probably should, but I'm not going to. The Kemetic Tree of Life, and you understand that what he's saying is so fucking similar. And he's saying, like, it doesn't seem like they inhabited it, but let's just say for another sub theory where you had, let's just say, not even, or these aboriginals, right? These aboriginals, they extend from the continent of Africa, right? Let's just say Pangea was a thing, and they extended from the continent of Africa and took those ideas with them. And while the continents are drifting, they still made trips in between the oceans to keep contact, and treated the Americas like a workshop or a place to just expand, but not necessarily home, but it happened to turn into home. That could just be a theory, just a question. I don't fucking know. But one more video. Let me see. What the hell was this? Hold up. Y'all not gonna play the volume?
Archaeologists say they have found evidence of 200,000 actual cities of mound-like structures all across North America that were here long before Columbus.
Wow.
But we don't know anything about them. Why? Why?
Just so you know, I did not watch this fully. I probably watched the first couple seconds of this and saved it to my Instagram, and we watching it now. And it's funny, at the bottom of it says, there is zero evidence that shows they were here before the red-skinned Native Americans.
Advanced architectures all across North America. Did you know that? Hundreds of years before Columbus came. You always think, oh, well, the Indians, they didn't scar the land. So, no, not true. These were cities as large as any in the world at the time. London or Rome. They were metropolises. Archaeologists say they have found evidence.
And that was
Alright, so in this book, just want to show a couple of things here to correlate what we've been learning about the true old world. It says, we are not indebted to either ancient Egypt for either religion or masonry, but to America. So he's saying how they believe that all these symbolism came out of Egypt, and that from there it spread to those other places like India and Persia. But it says we are not indebted to either ancient Egypt for either religion or masonry, but to America. It is a fact that at Memphis, Egypt, in pyramids, under the guidance of the kings of the mystic rites of masonry, were worked many thousands of years ago. But at that time, Egypt and the continent of America were one and the same.
Well, I'm going to pause it right there because I didn't know about this. But let's just add that on to the theory. Who's to say that the Aboriginal people that were here happen to still be a part of the Egyptian Empire in Africa at the same time, sharing the same beliefs or similar beliefs, right?
All right, so when they're talking about Memphis, Egypt, what Memphis are they talking about? Are they talking about Memphis in America? The real Egypt? We're about to read that right now, so listen to what they're saying. All right, so in this book, just wanted to show a couple of...
Like, take for instance, in Richard Noon's book, Ice the Ultimate Disaster, this particular book where he talks about the Europeans finding Egyptians in Maine that spoke and wrote hieroglyphics somewhere in the 1700s. And he talks about how...
If you don't know who those people are, those are the Algonquin Indians. Those are the people in Maine that spoke and wrote in hieroglyphics. That's because they were taught that for years. These are Native Americans who've been taught that language for years, which means it's been information that's been on this continent that's been passed down for years.
They found tablets of Akhenaten, hymn to Akhenaten in Oklahoma almost 20 years or 30 years before they even knew Akhenaten existed, when they excavated his ruins in Kemet in the late 1800s. They found hieroglyphic slabs.
Now, with the evidence that's being shown here, it sways you to believe that there was a connected empire. And there could have been. It definitely adds the fuck up.
The hymn of Aton in Oklahoma. When I went to Memphis, Tennessee, the curator of a black underground railroad explained that the native indigenous people, which you know of as Native Americans there, talked about when the settlers came to Memphis, Tennessee, what named Memphis by the Masons of the European set. The Native Americans told them that this was named Memphis by a group of Egyptians that traveled to that land and was living on that land and was ruling that land when they migrated in. As a result, they preserved the name Memphis long after the black text, for instance.
If you didn't hear what he said, basically what he was saying is that the city of Memphis got named by Egyptians that came to that land and named it Memphis. Why that is important is because there is a city that is very important within the history of Egypt, in the land of Egypt, also called Memphis. Geographically, if you go look, I'm not about to do it right now because I did this already in another video. You will see that right north of motherfucking Memphis, there is a delta that looks just like the Nile Delta. I'm not shitting you. Next video.
We're the true Almoroccans or Americans. The European colonists took over and started calling themselves Americans and started changing the history, saying that they brought us here. We were always here. You've got pyramid kuntas in Central South America that are older than the pyramids in Giza in Misraim that the people call Egypt. Older. You've got...
And I've been saying this shit. I've been saying this.
Civilization principles that are here in Lower Egypt that you call Kentucky and Tennessee area that is older than they are in what you call Egypt.
You heard him.
But those things are held secret because they don't want these people to know that they're the heirs apparent to this land. So they branded them Negro, black, and colored to cut off the linear history.
This nigga done sum this shit up so easily. That's the best way to put it to this theory. Nigga, we always done been here. And we got all different shades. That includes the Hispanics. Whether you Cuban, Puerto Rican, Mexican, all of that. People who know their lineage comes from this land mass. And then we got, how can I say, categorized as Negro, colored, black, Hispanic, all types of shit, where we're all divided. It's that divide and conquer shit.
So when the people think they're Negro, black, and colored, they can't tie to the illustrious history of the founders of civilization. As a matter of fact, they keep trying to leave and everybody else trying to come here because they don't even know that this is the hub, the North Gate. We're the true Almoroc.
Alright, let's see. There's another video.
And as the curtain which has hitherto concealed in prehistoric connection between the peoples of ancient Egypt and of America is lifted, it will be seen that the people of the eagle on the Nile being descended from the original people of the eagle on this continent. The twain are one in that prehistoric America was the original Egypt or Eagle land prior to the mighty expansion in the days of Peleg, when the earth was divided and the great globe itself was nearly rent asunder. Again, that prehistoric America was the original Egypt, alright? The original Egypt was here in America, alright? And as I said right there, right before, it says that all that is sublime in historic past centers upon Egypt, right? Of what they think of Egypt as today, but all that is sublime in the prehistoric past centers upon America or Atlantis. And as the curtain which has heard...
Alright, I guess that's confirming it somehow.
From native to Negroes? What happened? What happened? Why did they try so hard to erase us? So-called African Americans that are aborigine to Turtle Island.
Alright, I'm gonna pause it there because he's saying some shit I already confirmed. And I got one last video. And this
hemisphere. In the heartlands of what is now Mexico, the great Aztec capital of Tenochtitlan dominated the landscape. Built atop partially reclaimed lands in the middle of a lake, the city was both a marvel of architecture and engineering. Great causeways connected it to the shores, while floating gardens provided sustenance for its citizens. Magnificent temples rose high into the air, sat alongside a palace so luxurious it would make Versailles look like your average Denny's. On the eve of the Spanish conquest, at a time when Europe's greatest cities rarely housed more than 100,000 people, Tenochtitlan...
Hear what he said. Before London's houses even held more than 10 people.
Was home to 250,000. But while London and Paris would survive in varying forms in the modern world, Tenochtitlan was doomed to vanish. Ransacked, burned, and built over by the Spanish, it now only exists as ruins. Yet enough records still survive for us to picture what it must have looked like back when it was the capital of a mighty empire. Today we're examining the life and legacy of one of history's greatest cities. At the moment the conquistadors first set foot on Mexico's shores, the Aztec Empire was a booming superpower. Radiating out from its capital of Tenochtitlan, the empire covered 500 separate cities, stretching almost from the Atlantic to the Pacific. With over 6 million...
And these are the people I believe are after the Mayan, Olmecs, Mayans, and then Olmecs, Mayans, Aztecs. Then I believe once they get situated, it'll be Incas. I forgot how the fuck that shit works.
Inhabitants, it was a state the likes of which Mesoamerica had rarely seen before.
But what I find
it
important,
had all started. All court, but it was
what I find important about this is all the pyramids, the pyramid structures on this man-made island on a lake. But what's even crazier about this is what the people look like. The description of the people. Okay, just look. And this is what is so fucking amazing. You don't see nobody with light skin. Don't get me wrong. It's not like they couldn't have used lighter paint for this because they obviously have whiter things in the picture. So the possibility of painting lighter skin, it was there. They didn't. This is what they looked like back then. They looked like us. It's a bunch of different shades of us, bunch of different phenotypes. As you can see, not everyone necessarily looks alike, but you can see there's very close similarities. The reason I'm saying this is this was close to the most modern civilization that we know of the ancient world. And they're similar to us. With similar cultural things as ancient Kemet. I'm probably not gonna go too much into this because this is just what I wanted y'all to see is the artwork, because there's multiple artwork from this period. I'm guessing those must be Europeans.
Like the Aztecs, these societies also practiced non-human sacrifice. For instance, you might stand...
Hello? Can anybody hear me?
Oh my god.
Stab yourself in the tongue or ear to make a blood offering. Or you might bake a bread image of a god after mixing the dough with honey and blood. Known as sali, these effigies would then be eaten after you had performed a ritual, setting up another debt. It was a debt that Aztec culture paid primarily with blood. By the time the Aztecs came along, human sacrifice was already old hat in Mesoamerica. The Olmecs, whose civilization had fallen a full millennium before the Aztecs appeared.
A full millennium before the Aztecs appeared, so 1,000 years before the Aztecs appeared. The Olmecs were there, as you can see by artwork, dark skin. Look like some European ass niggas. Yeah. Alright, well, that's about it. But as you can see, the point of this video is to show you and to have you thinking, what if the culture here in America is a shared culture from ancient Kemet, or it was its own thing that had similarities to what ancient Kemet had? The evidence is there. It's just what needs to be there to confirm it. It's a lot of questions to be asked. It's a lot of evidence being shown, and there's only going to be more to show. But yeah, man, this is a conclusion of everything. If you like what I've been doing here, man, like, comment, subscribe, and share. We're going to do some more exploring on this topic, man. I'm very interested in this. Pablo out. Peace.